Before we dive into the meat of today's conversation, I think it's important to just introduce ReigPlus to those who are new to it. ReigPlus is a real estate as a service business. What that basically translates into is we focus on helping investors reach the singular outcome that they seek when it comes to real estate investing. So let me use a very simple example that everyone here should be very comfortable with. We've all used electricity. You go to your house, you plug in a light bulb, it works. That's what a service is. That's you don't have to understand how the sausage is made to be able to get value out of it. So our real estate model is very simple. We help you take care of all of the intermediate steps in a complex transaction. So from sourcing to entity formation to financing the deal, closing the deal, and after closing, actually helping you manage the property if it's something that you desire. Um, I guess I said I'm Ogi Ojor. Why did this come up? I'm a transformation architect. So in my what I do is find solutions to problems that I make observations about. And I'm an ex EY partner, ex Tata partner, senior leader at PwC. So over my 30 plus years of working with big clients in the last 5 years, we focus primarily on helping clients transform from their their current business model to using that as a service model. Tamika has been in the, and Tamika will introduce herself, but she's my co-founder. She's been in the real estate business for a while. I'm kind of thought about how could we transform the way the real estate business today works. So starting with the investment angle, we came up with the as a service model. I have two other presenters. They'll both introduce themselves as I bring them into the conversation. But that's ReigPlus in a nutshell. It's a real estate as a service business which focuses on, if you think about the outcomes investors look for, cash flow, property appreciation, equity buildup, everything in the middle. With, you know, from sourcing for the property, doing the financial due diligence as to is it a great investment, to finding you tenants, to helping you with repairs. That's what the end-to-end service is. We'll have time for ample questions as we go through this. I think let's walk through the presentation first, then we'll do questions. Today, let me touch a little bit about what we'll be covering today. We'll be this order is really around priority more than the chronological order of the content in the deck. So things that are top of mind for people. How do I buy a US property without paying all cash? My audience today is primarily Nigerian. And in Nigeria, we're a cash economy. We think in terms of buying as you pay for it. How do Nigerians qualify for US financing with no credit history? So we'll touch on that significantly. How do I build US income and long-term wealth? And we'll talk in detail the steps for getting there. So that's what we'll be covering today. Our guest speaker, Stephen, will cover a lot of the financing bits, which I know that's why we have such a large audience today. Tamika will be covering the market insights around the US and Georgia in particular. I'm here just to kind of walk you guys through the gravy stuff. The problem, I'm not telling folks on this call anything they don't already know. The problem for most Nigerian investors, the number one problem is really around taking a large cash to go buy a property. That's given where the exchange rate is, that's a pretty huge ask for most Nigerian investors. So that's problem number one. Problem number two really revolves around FX constraints for large transfer transfers. Yeah, Stephen will talk a lot about this in his part of the presentation. The fear of scams and losing capital. That's big. I just came back from Nigeria. We were sourcing a warehouse, and lots of places that we went to had signs up. This building is not for sale. The only reason you have that is what? Someone's trying to sell the building that's not authorized to sell it. You don't, those are problems that are well handled in the constructs that we have within the US. So the loss of capital is another part, another major hurdle for Nigerian investors. If you're going to invest such a large amount, you, I guess the first rule of investing is don't lose money. So making sure you have someone that helps you with that, advise you along those lines is critical. Then for a long while, access to US mortgage was a problem. We've that problem is a bit addressed now, but there are certain things you need to do to be able to still get a US mortgage. So this problem set, and I'm sure there are others that we've kind of deprioritized, and hopefully as we introduce folks to talk about the ask questions, additional problems will be identified. But these problem set are significant, and we've taken a laser look at them to make sure ReigPlus is able to address this for folks. And as a result of this problem set, people typically miss out on opportunities. You've got cash that's worth $1 today, and the next day it's worth 50 cents idling in your bank account. So we're hoping to help you, address those kind of problems. The problem of inertia. Most people never start. Everybody wants to win the lottery. Nobody wants to play. It's a significant dilemma. I'm not immune to it. When I first came to the States, you had the stock market taking off significantly. Companies like Netflix, sorry, not Netflix, Netscape, Mosaic, they were all coming out, and I stood by and just watched people make money and never start investing. It took me a while. And typically why that happens is you don't have the structure around you to help you make decisions to move forward to start. In the case of real estate, you say, well, I have no US credit history. You worry about fraud, you worry about the complexities, the legal complexities, and there are some legal complexities, definitely. You worry about, if I'm going to do this right, what's the right tax structure to make this work for me? I know for investors in Nigeria, the tax implications are less important, but you do have Nigerians within the US that are looking to buy where there's significant tax benefits for owning real estate. Again, I'm going to say I'm not a tax advisor. We do have tax folks working for us that can talk about the subject a lot better. Current currency transfer challenges. These still exist. I think Stephen will touch a little bit about what that process is of getting your funds ready to be able to do a transaction and not having a trusted network. Now, the ReigPlus model is built on an ecosystem of partners that we trust and have vetted. So all of the things that may keep you up at night and say, I can't start, ReigPlus is taking time to do the required due diligence to make things work for you. I think I actually just touched on this, that ReigPlus, we've solved everything. This is the sourcing of the property, which includes not just locating the property itself, but doing the financial due diligence that makes sense. This property, this market, this price point makes sense for this transaction. The financial access to financing, Homeboard will really dive into the nuts and bolts sorry, Home Abroad will dive into the nuts and bolts of the financing piece, and he'll take a large chunk of this presentation. Now, lots of people we know buy real estate without the proper constructs for it. The LLC setup, that's entity formation, whether it's your LLC, your bank account, these are things that will advise you on and help you put in place. Legal compliance, all of the legal and compliance work. We have title attorneys, we have um, LLC formation attorneys, all on staff, not on staff, on in a partnership model, helping with things like that. Then the property management is also big. For folks who want to manage their own property, if they're physically here in the US, that's not a problem. If you live outside the country, then having a property manager is a must. It's a legal requirement, I believe. So we've taken care of all of that for you. And that's at the core of ReigPlus's mandate, is to handle the sausage making and give you the output, which is cash flow, property appreciation, equity buildup. And we do that with an ecosystem. I'm sounding like a consultant now. We say ecosystem play, but it's a real thing. It's solving problems by bringing others into it. So one of our lenders is on the call on this webinar, walk you extensively through some of the processes associated with financing. We have Tamika as part of, she has both her homes by Tamika brand, and she's also a licensed broker for Kelly Williams. So we bring the power of Kelly Williams into the picture. We have licensed brokers on the ground in Nigeria who partner with us with helping us identify or help clients, walk through the on the ground things in Nigeria. Property management service. This is an important one because this is where folks really worry. Am I going to be plunging the toilet at 2 a.m. when I get a property? I have a property. I've never had to go do that. So there's a plan in place for that. Having attorneys and CPA to make sure that you're making the right decisions at the right time. I have a friend, not a client, someone I spoke to that told me they sold their property and had to pay a lot in taxes. And my question to them, did you speak to an advisor? And the answer was after the fact. So here we are on your behalf, watching those things and making sure you're making the right decisions, having the right support very early in the conversation. The process from start to finish. Yes, we say 6 to 12 weeks. It could be less. There are some requirements depending on where your funds already are. There's also, we're never too aggressive, which means if we don't find the right deal, we don't do the deal. So the 6 to 12 weeks is it's what's called it's a goal, but we don't stick by it if we don't find the right deal. So the market, Tamika will touch on the state of the market right now. We have 3 deals in the pipeline that we're working currently, and the clients are a bit gun shy, and there's no pressure on them to act until they find a deal that works for them. And what do I mean by this? Is the cash flow right? Is the target market right? We don't compromise on any of those things. We make sure that we're putting you in an investment that we think, again, we're not guaranteeing investments because it's an investment, but we're doing everything, all the due diligence to make sure it's the right call that we're making. Things like the LLC setup, those are fairly quick. The setup of the bank account, those are fairly quick. The strategy call is fairly quick. The property selection, there is some amount of due diligence that goes there, because unlike a lifestyle property where The goal is I want a swimming pool, I want 4 bedrooms, 5 bath. The goal here is very different. The goal here is to find a property that satisfies your investment goals. So that takes a little bit more due diligence. So we do spend a fair amount of time in the property selection. I think the financial and physical due diligence around the properties, those are a bit more well defined. We know what that process is. And for the due diligence around the property, that typically takes place fairly quickly. The financing piece, Stephen will talk a little bit more about that. The closing and rent collection, those are fairly straightforward activities. What happens after you buy? Well, you start making money. That's the goal. So the tenant pays rent monthly. We help you manage the property if that's what you want, or if you're in a position to do that. Now, if you're outside the country, I believe there is a rule that the property has to be managed. We don't have to manage it for you. You can have someone else manage it for you, but it's a service that we offer. Um, we deposit funds into your US account, and you can have those funds automated into your Nigerian account. It's passive ownership. There's the the most work you do is at the beginning, and once it's all set up, you check your monthly statements regularly. So I think I've touched on this a little bit already. What you get income pegged in US currency. You get real estate. We know it's a way to diversify your portfolio. um, Folks invest in real estate, you invest in stocks, you invest in commodities, you invest in treasury bills. We hear a lot of people talk about diversification, and we say, well, I have ETFs. That's the wealthy don't focus on that from a diversification perspective. They look at different industries, they look at different vehicles for investment as their diversification strategy. Again, I'm not a licensed investment advisor, so I'm not giving investment advice. Asset protection, you know, we in the US, you can't own a mortgage without having these things in place. There's insurance, there's title insurance, there's insurance on the property itself, there's landlord insurance if you decide to get landlord insurance. So there's so many things that help you protect your asset, and it's well defined. And the goal is long-term appreciation. So you've got cash flow, which in the meantime is helping you pay down the mortgage. You're accumulating equity in the building, and you're hoping, or you've selected the building in such a way that that building is expected to appreciate. Now, this statement's a bit tongue in cheek. Say you don't need cash, you need structure. The last part of it is 100% correct. The first part is a bit tongue in cheek. Yes, you need some form of down payment, so you do need some cash. But I wanted to be a bit provocative when I said you don't need cash. It's We see a lot of those books that say no money down. That's not this here. There's an expectation that uh, there's some down payment that you're making, and but more importantly, I think the cash down payment is not the major challenge for Nigerian investors, is the lack of structure. And that's what I wanted to emphasize. That with the right structure, your idle dollars or your idle naira can be working for you. So I know I've gone on I've talked a lot, and it sounds like it's a monologue, but you'll have the opportunity to definitely ask questions. I wanted to get through a lot of that first. I think I'm going to pass on to Tamika. Tamika is my lovely wife. She's a Georgia peach. She'll introduce herself, and she's going to give us insights into the market.